Well, let's get more perspective on the overhaul, what it bodes for America and the world, and talk to Brian Becker of the Anti-War Answer Coalition.
Thanks.
Brian, very good evening to you. Thanks for being with us. This is a very extensive plan. The details are still coming through. Now, while we've heard some of the details, what practical effect will it have on America's military forays, do you think? First of all, let's pin that one down.
Well, I think that what the Obama administration is doing is going back. In fact, they're not really going forward. They're going back to the first decade after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War. During that time, there was the air war against Iraq, the 1991 air war that lasted 42 days. The United States flew 120,000 military sorties over Iraq. 100,000 Iraqis died. There were about 100 American casualties. In 1999, the United States, using NATO, dropped 23,000 bombs and missiles on Yugoslavia in an attempt to annex and break away Kosovo. That was successful when they threatened a ground war to go with it in June 1999. I think it's clear that the Iraq invasion and occupation has been a disaster militarily and politically, as has Afghanistan. The United States is retooling, but again, you should be careful to remember what Obama said today. Our goal is not, as we go to a, quote, leaner and meaner military, anything other than the maintenance of U.S. military supremacy. Those are his own words. It's
a very ambitious project on his behalf. Do you see him getting it through Congress? Will he squeeze it through? A Congress that makes no secret of his hostility to the president.
Well, part of the defense budget cuts are triggered by the failure of the so-called super committee to come up with budget deficit reductions. But I think this is also in keeping with what the Pentagon wants. The generals and admirals are not looking forward to another Afghanistan or another Iraq. They have a different vision for maintaining military domination or military supremacy, as they put it. I think the Obama administration is not going against the Pentagon, it's going with the Pentagon. And even though the Republicans will demagogically attack the Democrats and Obama for being weak on defense, I think, in fact, this has the full support of the military establishment.
What about his staying power on it? I mean, we've seen plenty of broken promises before, from Guantanamo to the repeal of Bush-era tax cuts for the ultra-rich. Will he stay by it, do you think, this plan?
Well, there's no reason not to, because this is not a progressive development. This is not a step away from war. This is not a step towards pacifism or a step towards a retreat from empire building. It's actually the use of a military strategy that costs the American political leaders, be they Obama or whoever takes his place afterwards, less on the home front. If there are fewer American casualties, if all the bleeding is done on the other side, if all of the destruction is done by those who have suffered the consequences of air war, they feel that there will be less anti-war sentiment at home. So it's not a promise in the progressive direction. So I think Obama will be very comfortable with this.
And how's this going to go down with China? How's the country likely to react? I mean, the US has been the first to criticize Beijing's growing military, yet at the same time, now it's announcing a plan which amounts to its military surrounding China.
Well, indeed, I think that what the Obama administration and what the Pentagon are doing in it, and Obama signaled it explicitly in his speech today, where he puts again the primacy of the turn towards Asia, which really is a turn against China. I think they're looking forward to endless competition and the evolution of a possible Cold War type scenario with China, which again gives the Pentagon a long-term enemy, which justifies, gives rationale to the continued expansion of the U.S. defense budget. This does not cut the defense budget. It only slows the projected growth of the defense budget. So we're looking at trillions more in defense expenditures, and a lot of it will be used to justify, or justified as a pretext against the People's Republic of China, something very threatening to China.
Yeah, just looking at some more of Obama's quotes here, he said the military budget will continue to grow, albeit slower than before, as you mentioned there, until the U.S., quote, gets its fiscal house in order. What does that mean?
Well, you know, there's amazing levels of deficit. The deficit level in the United States is now almost 100% of GNP. It's up in the $15 trillion range. Even 5 years ago, it was at about 60%. Those deficits are likely to continue. The economy is still stuck. There are 40 million who are unemployed or underemployed. Millions are facing foreclosures at home. The U.S. government budget deficit is a major problem and a threat to the United States standing in the global market. But nonetheless, the primacy of the military-industrial complex is in fact intact. So if there's a budget shortfall, you'll see teachers laid off, nurses laid off, firefighters laid off, but the Pentagon will get more than its fair share.
Final thought, what does it say about the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan? Is this reshuffle basically maybe an admission of expensive failure? And I think we've lost the connection to Washington, D.C. there. Well, we had a good crack at that interview. Thanks, Brian Becker, if you can still hear me. Thanks for being on the programme. OK.